Hello, this is Chair Chat number 9. In this video, I'm going to talk about my early band years. I was very, very fortunate, coming up through the ranks because where I lived, West Philadelphia, and probably just West Philly in general, is bands were all over the place. Every neighborhood had at least one band. And so in my neighborhood, 2 blocks, there were at least 3, 4 bands. And there's one band that was popular. A band called Project 101. And one of the things, we kids would do is when these bands would practice, we would hope that they would leave the window open. It was usually open just a little bit so we could take turns peeking in to see the bands because you wanted to see them, play. Usually, they didn't quite, the windows, at least if they were in their house, was never fully open to look in. And this band was really, really good. And usually there were a couple of gauges in terms of, how you measure a good band. One was if the band could play the entire changes of, of a song. Because usually, most of us kids, we couldn't play the changes. We would just be able to play the main part. So, for example, if you were to take, say, Inagata da Vida, we would just play dun dun da 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 dun 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 dun, and we would play that for hours. When it came to the change, oh, won't you come with? We couldn't handle that, But you get these good bands; they could play the entire, song, all the changes. That was, that was a sign of a good band. The other sign was, how loud they were. Somehow, if the louder you were, the better. And then the other thing would have been, how big, the amps were. That was a status symbol. If you had a big amp, wow. So that was Project 101. I mentioned in the previous video about Mr. Blake, who owned a business and around the corner, and my friend Darnell pointed out that it was sort of an incense. And he sold scents and stuff, but also, he did have Hot Wheels in the window, and that was enough to get, my attention, so we were always looking at his window to see if he had something new, and we would go in and buy a new Hot Wheel car when we could. But his band would play on the weekends, some weekends, and it was like calypso music, which was, a little different than, what we were used to hearing. But we could tell it was really good, And then my best friend, John, his uncle sang in a gospel group. And, every so often that group would come and practice at John's house. Now, John lived with his grandmother. And one very, very cool thing about John, and again, John, he was, my best friend, was on Sundays, there was this huge event at his house where his grandmother would make these huge breakfasts like we've never seen. I've never known any family, in the neighborhood or anywhere that would have these Gothic breakfasts. So, of course, with John's family, there would, be people that would, come around because for his family, this was a big, big event. And you were lucky, as I was sometimes, to be invited for breakfast sometimes. So that was great. And then the band, after breakfast, would practice. So now, now we've got the gospel thing happening. Now, in the neighborhood, on most Sundays anyway, somebody would be blaring gospel music. And you could hear this for, a block or so. Well, when the gospel band was playing, nobody had to play gospel music. We would just hear it live with the band. And we kids were young, pre-teenagers were kind of amused because John's uncle, who was the singer, he's singing a tune and he's getting all into it. I woke up this morning with a temperature of 105. And we're like, he's lying. Cat didn't wake up this morning with not the way he was eating breakfast, but we kind of laugh, at that. And the band, I just remember, the guitar player. It seems like a lot of those kinds of groups, the gospel musicians, they seem to favor the Fender Jaguar guitar. And they usually have that and wear sunglasses, even if they're in the house, And the bass player, man, you could hear this guy for blocks because he had this refrigerator of an amp. But that was enough to impress us, kids. But they were very, very good, and the neighborhood would just, you could tell they're out there bopping, and all that stuff. So there were bands, everywhere. Now we're talking like 2 blocks in a straight line. If you go around the corner, you've got the band that eventually became the band for the Village People. And the bass player eventually was one of the founding members of the Roots. We went to school together, and, on Sundays, maybe the both of us would end up out there, playing in the park with a lot of the musicians that would congregate. It was usually percussionists, but he played, he would bring out his upright, an amazing upright player. I mean, he's just an amazing musician all around, but that was fun. And I remember the Delphonics, remember the Delphonics? And the lead singer, who I think lived in an apartment right on the corner, we would see him there sometimes. And on this one particular day, he's out there and he's got his, big hat and, kind of hippie gear, but we're talking 70s. Of course it was hippie gear. And probably one of them, with one of the most beautiful women we had ever seen. She kind of looked like a Selma Hayek, if that's her name. And wow, So another thing that was very popular during this time is bands would have storefronts. They would rent storefronts. So when you walk down in what used to be a business area, there weren't that many businesses. Instead, you have a lot of these storefronts being rented by bands who would open up the curtains, and hoping that passerbys would stare in the window, because, the idea was to be discovered. That's what all of us bands wanted, to be discovered. And then, you had the Tramps, Disco Inferno, they're on the other side of the street, around the corner. I mean, there were just bands all over the place. And that's definitely going to make, a mark on you. It certainly made a mark on me. So I'm going to leave you with that for now. Let me just say that if you'd like to make a contribution, it will be greatly appreciated. And thank you to those who have made a contribution. And so I will leave you with that, and I will say, see you next time.